At 6:17 on a cold October morning, Atlas did something no one at the military dog retirement center had ever seen him do. The old German shepherd rose from his blanket, crossed his kennel on stiff legs, and struck the metal gate with both front paws. The sound cracked through the silent building like a warning. Then he backed away, stared toward the front office, and gave one low bark. Emily Carter froze with her pen above a line marked Final Placement Review. 23 names waited beneath it. The center was not closing, but its medical wing was over capacity. Donations had fallen for 6 straight months, and 3 more retired working dogs were arriving before the end of the week. Every animal on Emily's list would be evaluated for transfer. The strongest might find space in other facilities. The oldest and most medically complicated might not. Atlas struck the gate again. "Easy, boy," volunteer caretaker James Holloway said as he hurried down the aisle. Atlas ignored him. His ears pointed toward the parking lot. His silver muzzle lifted, testing the air through the open ventilation windows. A moment later, the distant rattle of a diesel engine rolled across the property. An old pickup turned through the gate. Atlas stopped barking. He stood perfectly still, watching the truck as if the person inside had already given him a command. Before we go farther, tell us in the comments what city or state you are watching from, and what loyalty means to you. And subscribe if you believe courage deserves to be remembered long after the uniform comes off. The truck parked beside the administration building. A tall white man stepped out wearing worn jeans, brown work boots, and a faded olive jacket. His hair was silver at the temples, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a face made calm by discipline rather than ease. On the right side of his neck, just above his collar, was the tattoo of a German shepherd. He closed the door, looked toward the kennels, and did not move for several seconds. Atlas pressed his nose to the wire. The man noticed him from almost 100 feet away. His name was Nathan Brooks. He was 58 years old, a retired Navy SEAL, and he had spent most of his adult life trusting working dogs in places where hesitation could cost more than a mission. He had not visited the center to make a speech, take photographs, or select the youngest dog in the building. He had called 2 days earlier and asked one question: how many are still waiting? Emily had told him 23. Now, as she stepped outside to greet him, she wondered whether he had misunderstood. "Mr. Brooks, Nathan is fine." They shook hands. His grip was firm but careful. Emily glanced toward his truck. "Did anyone come with you?" "No. You said you were interested in adoption." "I am." James joined them at the door. "Do you have a particular dog in mind?" Nathan looked through the open entrance at the rows of gray muzzles and watchful eyes. "I have not met them yet." He entered without another word. The retirement facility stood just north of San Diego, far enough from the city that eucalyptus and dry grass carried more strongly on the air than traffic. The building was clean. Every kennel had fresh water, soft bedding, and a clipped medical chart. The dogs were cared for by people who loved them. Still, love could not create space, pay every surgery, or make an elderly working dog easy to place. Nathan walked past the first kennel and stopped. The nameplate read Ranger 2. The German shepherd inside was nearly deaf and had arthritis in both hips. Nathan knelt, turned his body slightly instead of facing the dog head-on, and waited. Ranger 2 watched him for half a minute before taking 3 careful steps forward. Nathan held 2 fingers near the wire. The dog sniffed, then rested his nose against them. Nathan moved to the next kennel. Dakota had guarded an airfield overseas. Echo had searched collapsed buildings after earthquakes. Shadow had located missing children after a hurricane. Mercy had served with a medical evacuation unit. Cooper had lost most of his sight. Boone startled at rolling carts because their wheels sounded like equipment from his years in cargo terminals. Nathan read every note. He did not ask which dogs were easiest. He did not ask which one had the longest life expectancy. He asked about medication, triggers, feeding routines, sleep patterns, and the names of former handlers when they were known. The deeper he moved into the kennel wing, the quieter the staff became. When he reached Atlas, the old dog was still standing. "Explosives detection and disaster search," Emily said. 8 years of service. 2 overseas deployments. He later worked stateside with an urban search team. Nathan crouched. Atlas came forward at once. No barking. No circling. He placed his broad, silvered muzzle against the fence and inhaled slowly. Nathan raised his hand. Atlas leaned into it through the wire. James looked at Emily. He has never done that with a first-time visitor. Nathan studied the identification tag hanging from Atlas's collar. The stamped metal was scratched nearly smooth at the edges. Where is his handler? Emily hesitated. Killed in a vehicle accident 3 years ago. Atlas was already retired, but he waited by the facility gate every afternoon for months. Nathan's jaw tightened. Atlas held his gaze. Maybe he recognizes the waiting, James said softly. Nathan stayed there longer than he had at the other kennels. When he finally stood, Atlas followed him along the inside of the gate until the wall stopped him. Nearly an hour after entering, Nathan returned to the front office. Emily brought out one application folder. She expected him to ask whether Atlas could go home that day. Instead, Nathan removed his baseball cap and looked through the office window at the full kennel wing. I will take all of them. The room became so quiet that the buzz of the fluorescent lights seemed loud. Emily blinked. All of them. All 23. James gave a short, nervous laugh, then stopped when Nathan did not. Mr. Brooks, Emily said, several need daily medication. 2 are nearly blind. 4 have serious mobility problems. 1 needs a special diet that costs more than my weekly grocery bill. I read the charts. They cannot simply live together in a yard. Some need quiet zones. Some need controlled introductions. They require veterinary oversight, secure fencing, transportation, insurance, and trained help. I know. Do you? There was no insult in her question. Only fear. Emily had seen kind people promise more than they could carry. The dogs paid for those promises when they were returned. Nathan set his cap on the desk. 32 miles north of here, I have 46 acres that belonged to my grandfather. There is a farmhouse, a red barn, 3 fenced pastures, a well, and a service road wide enough for emergency vehicles. I have spent 4 years restoring the property. The south barn has heated floors and 2 rooms. The old tack room is now a medication room. The fencing is 6 feet high with buried reinforcement along the lower line. Emily stared at him. Nathan took a folded packet from inside his jacket. It contained photographs, property records, a preliminary veterinary agreement, construction permits, and bank statements with the account numbers blacked out. I plan to adopt 1 retired dog, he said. Then I learned how many were waiting. James turned through the photographs. You built this before you called us. I started after my own dog died. Emily looked up. A service dog? A partner. For the first time, Nathan's voice lost some of its steadiness. He took a breath and continued. I am not asking you to ignore procedure. Inspect the property. Interview the veterinarian. Run every background check you have. Tell me what must be changed, and I will change it. Emily looked through the office window. Atlas stood at the front of his kennel, watching them. What happens when the bills become larger than you expect? She asked. I sold my share of a maritime security company 3 years ago. I have my retirement income, the property is paid for, and I have enough set aside for several years of care. After that, I will find another way. That is not a long-term plan. No, Nathan said. It is a beginning. Emily closed the single adoption folder. Then she pulled a blank legal pad toward her. If we even consider this, the county will require an animal sanctuary permit. The dogs cannot be released together until behavior assessments are completed. We need an emergency evacuation plan, separate recovery areas, and proof that you have trained support. Nathan nodded. How long? Normally? Months. Dogs do not have months. Emily knew that. The truth sat between them. I can request an expedited inspection, she said. That gives us 10 days. But if the ranch fails, the answer is no. Nathan put on his cap. Then we have 10 days. Atlas gave one quiet bark from the kennel wing. The ranch looked peaceful in the photographs. In person, it looked like a place trying to remember what it had once been. The farmhouse sat beneath 2 enormous coast live oaks. The barn's red paint had faded to rust at the corners. The main pasture rolled toward a low ridge lined with eucalyptus. Beyond it, the land dropped toward a creek that ran only after heavy rain. Emily arrived the following morning with James, Sarah Kim, a veterinary technician from the retirement center, and a county inspector named Luis Ortega. Nathan waited at the gate. A cedar board had been mounted above it. No words were carved into the wood yet. Luis stepped from his vehicle holding a tablet. 46 acres sounds generous. Acres do not matter if the dogs can escape, overheat, fight, or miss medical care. Nathan nodded. Show me every problem. The inspector did. The north pasture fence had 2 weak posts. The barn needed an additional fire exit. The medication room sink required a backflow device. A drainage channel had to be dug so winter rain would not flood the recovery stalls. The emergency generator was large enough for lights and refrigeration, but not the heated flooring. One section of roof showed dry rot. The evacuation trailer could hold 12 dogs safely, not 23. Luis stood in the barn aisle and lowered his tablet. "You have done impressive work," he said. "But impressive is not compliant. How much time to correct it?" "The hearing is in 9 days." Emily looked toward Nathan. She expected disappointment or anger. He only asked, "What is the minimum safe width for the second exit?" For the next 6 days, Nathan worked from before sunrise until after dark. James brought tools from the center. Sarah contacted a mobile veterinarian willing to serve as medical director. Emily spent evenings rewriting the care plan. Nathan purchased lumber, fire doors, portable kennels, and a second used livestock trailer. He hired an electrician to expand the generator panel and a plumber to install the sync device. The money left his account faster than he admitted. At night, when everyone went home, he sat alone on the porch with a cup of coffee gone cold in his hands. The ranch was quiet enough for old memories to become loud. He would hear a rotor where there was only wind in the trees. A slamming board became a distant blast. Once, a dropped wrench sent him to the ground before he understood where he was. He stayed there on one knee, breathing through the shame. No one had seen, or so he thought. On the 7th morning, Emily arrived early and found Nathan asleep in a chair inside the barn. A framed photograph rested on his chest. It showed a younger Nathan beside a powerful German shepherd wearing protective goggles. On the back, 4 words had been written: "Partners until the end." Nathan woke at the sound of her boots. His name was Ranger, he said before she could ask. Emily sat on an overturned bucket across from him. Nathan looked at the photograph. "Ranger found a pressure plate before any of us saw it. Another time he pulled me toward a wall seconds before a roof section came down. He retired with me. I thought bringing him home would make everything simple. It did not. He woke at every sound. So did I. He searched rooms that were already safe. So did I. We kept standing guard because neither of us knew what else to do." Emily said nothing. "Then he got sick. I spent his last night on the kitchen floor. I promised him his life would not be measured only by what he had done in uniform. I promised I would help others like him." Nathan looked around the unfinished barn. "I put the promise away after he died." "Why?" "Because keeping it meant admitting I was still here." Outside, a hammer struck wood. James had arrived and begun work without interrupting. Emily looked toward the open door. "Maybe the promise waited because you needed help carrying it." Nathan almost smiled. "I am not good at asking." "Then it is fortunate 23 dogs are not asking either." By the evening before the hearing, the ranch had 2 fire exits. Reinforced fencing, a functioning medical room, 3 isolation areas, and an evacuation plan detailed enough to include the order in which mobility-impaired dogs would be loaded. It still had one serious problem. They lacked enough trained caregivers. County rules required at least 4 qualified adults to be available during daytime operations and 2 overnight until the dogs completed their adjustment period. Nathan had himself, Sarah on weekends, and James for limited volunteer hours. Emily had called every rescue group she knew. Most were already overwhelmed. At 4 that afternoon, a pickup stopped at the gate. An older man wearing a Marine Corps cap stepped out. "My name is Harold Mitchell," he said. "I heard the retirement center might lose space for some dogs." Behind him came a woman named Margaret, a retired nurse. Then William Parker, a former Army dog handler. Then a carpenter, a school bus mechanic, 2 veterinary students, and a quiet 26-year-old former Marine named Cole Davis who had not held steady work since leaving the service. By sunset, 14 people stood in the pasture. Emily looked at Nathan. "Did you call them?" "No," James held up his phone. "I posted one photograph." It showed Nathan asleep beside Ranger's old picture with the unfinished barn behind him. James had added a single line. "One veteran is trying to keep a promise to 23 others." The post had traveled across local veterans groups before breakfast. Luis returned the next morning for the final inspection. He checked every correction, reviewed the staffing schedule, and walked the evacuation route twice. Then he stood beneath the blank cedar sign at the gate. "You understand approval can be revoked if standards are not maintained." "I understand," Nathan said. Luis signed the temporary permit. Emily exhaled for what felt like the first time in 10 days. The dogs would not all move at once. Sarah insisted on 3 groups, so each animal could be introduced safely and observed. Atlas, Ranger 2, Dakota, Echo, Mercy, Cooper, Shadow, and Boone were chosen for the first transport. When Nathan returned to the retirement center, Atlas was waiting at his gate. Emily unlocked it. The old shepherd did not rush out. He stepped into the aisle, looked toward the remaining kennels, and stopped. Nathan followed his gaze. "We are not leaving them," he said. Atlas's ears shifted toward his voice. "We are coming back." Only then did Atlas walk forward. The first trailer had fresh straw over non-slip mats, secured water bowls, padded dividers, and enough room for the dogs to lie without being crowded. Nathan checked every latch twice. Employees gathered along the driveway. Some raised a hand in farewell. Others cried openly. Atlas entered last. At the top of the ramp, he looked back at the building where he had waited 3 years for a handler who would never return. Nathan rested a hand against his shoulder. "It is all right," he said. "This time, home is in front of you." Atlas climbed inside. The drive north took less than an hour, but Nathan watched the mirrors as if crossing a continent. When the convoy turned through the ranch gate, late afternoon lights stretched across the pasture. Nathan opened the trailer and waited. Atlas appeared at the threshold. Fresh air moved over his muzzle. He smelled grass, old oak bark, damp soil, hay, distant horses, and the faint salt carried inland from the ocean. He stepped onto the ramp, then onto earth. For a long moment, he did nothing. Then his ears rose. His tail moved once. The other dogs emerged at their own pace. Echo lowered his nose and traced the fence line. Shadow discovered a red rubber ball James had placed near the barn. Cooper followed the sound of Nathan's boots. Ranger 2 stood in the sunlight with his eyes half closed, letting warmth settle over his aching hips. Atlas walked to the largest oak tree and lowered himself into the grass. Nathan sat beside him. Neither looked back at the trailers. The second group arrived 3 days later. The third came at the end of the week. Each introduction required patience. Some dogs had spent years working independently and guarded food or doorways. Others became anxious when routines changed. Nathan separated feeding stations, kept walking paths wide, and learned the smallest signs of tension. He learned that Mercy would not eat unless a person remained in sight. Boone slept only near an open door. Dakota became restless during high wind. Echo, nearly deaf, watched the other dogs for cues. Cooper navigated by scent and touched Nathan's leg with his nose whenever the ground changed beneath him. Atlas watched everything. He did not dominate the group. He moved quietly between dogs, often placing himself near whichever animal seemed uncertain. When 2 shepherds stiffened over a shaded bed, Atlas walked between them, turned sideways, and stood until both relaxed. When Cooper became disoriented near the pond, Atlas nudged his shoulder and guided him back toward the worn path. "He is still working," Sarah said. Nathan watched Atlas settle beside Ranger 2 beneath the oak. "No," he answered. "He is choosing." The first week passed in a rhythm of meals, medications, short walks, and sleep. Nathan rose before dawn. Atlas waited on the porch. They crossed the pasture together while mist lay low over the grass. At night, Nathan checked the barn 3 times. On the 4th night, Atlas followed him back to the farmhouse, but refused to enter. He stood on the porch, staring at Nathan. "What?" Atlas stepped forward and touched Nathan's wrist with his nose. Nathan looked down. His hand was trembling. He had not noticed. A helicopter from a nearby training route moved beyond the ridge. The distant thump of its blades had tightened every muscle in Nathan's body. Atlas pressed his shoulder against Nathan's leg. Nathan closed his eyes and counted the dog's breaths. Slow in. Slow out. The helicopter faded. Nathan sat on the porch step. Atlas lowered himself beside him. "You did not retire, did you?" Nathan whispered. Atlas rested his muzzle on Nathan's boot. 2 weeks after the last dogs arrived, Emily visited with updated records. She stopped inside the gate and stared. The animals she remembered pacing behind wire were scattered across the property. Shadow carried his red ball through the grass. Mercy slept near the farmhouse door. Echo stood beside the creek, watching sunlight flash on moving water. Ranger 2 walked slowly but without the constant echo of concrete beneath him. Atlas came forward to greet her. "You remember me," she said, kneeling. He pressed his nose against her hand. "They remember kindness longer than people do." Nathan said. Emily walked the medical rounds with Sarah. Several dogs had gained healthy weight. Anxiety behaviors had decreased. Cooper's navigation had improved because the ranch paths remained consistent. Ranger 2 still needed pain medication, but he had begun choosing to walk farther each morning. Emily took a photograph beneath the oak tree. Nathan sat on a weathered bench. Atlas rested against his boots. Behind them, the pasture glowed in late autumn light. Emily posted it to the center's small community page with one sentence. Some heroes finally found each other. By sunrise, the photograph had been shared more than 20,000 times. Messages came from veterans, military families, dog handlers, teachers, veterinarians, and strangers who had never thought about what happened to working dogs after service. Some offered supplies. Some sent money. Many wrote about fathers, mothers, old friends, or animals they had failed to visit before it was too late. Nathan disliked the attention. When a local reporter called, he refused an interview. When a television crew appeared without notice, Atlas moved between Nathan and the camera, not aggressive, simply present. Nathan told them to leave. Emily worried the refusal would cost the ranch support. Nathan worried attention would turn the dogs into symbols instead of individuals. The disagreement came to a head in the barn. "We need recurring donations," Emily said. "Your account cannot carry this forever. I did not bring them here to become a spectacle. No one is asking for a spectacle. They want the old seal and the forgotten dogs. They want a clean story with music behind it." Emily folded her arms. "And what happens when Mercy needs surgery? What happens when the roof fails? What happens when 2 more dogs arrive at the center and there is nowhere for them?" Nathan looked away. Emily softened her voice. "You opened the gate. That does not mean you must close it behind you." Atlas stood near the barn entrance, watching both of them. Nathan rubbed a hand across his face. "One interview," he said. "No classified stories. No stage commands. No one enters the pasture without Sarah's approval." Emily nodded. "And every dog keeps his name. Every dog keeps his name." The interview was filmed from outside the fence. Nathan spoke for less than 4 minutes. He did not describe combat. He did not call himself a hero. He said the dogs had already done enough. He said retirement should not feel like abandonment. He said old age did not erase worth. Then Atlas walked into frame and leaned against his leg. That image traveled farther than anything Nathan said. Donations began arriving in amounts as small as $5 and as large as $10,000. A feed company offered 6 months of senior dog food. A mobile veterinarian donated 1 day each month. A carpenter repaired the barn roof. Children mailed drawings of German shepherds beneath blue skies. One little boy wrote, "Please tell the brave dogs they are still good boys even when they are too old to work." Nathan pinned the note above the medication cabinet. Every morning, he read it while preparing pills. The ranch changed slowly. A second shaded shelter rose near the south pasture. Orthopedic beds replaced the temporary mats. The medication room gained labeled cabinets. Volunteers built a wheelchair-friendly path for veterans who had begun visiting. The visitors surprised Nathan. They did not come only to see the dogs. Many came because the photograph had shown them a kind of quiet they missed. Harold Mitchell returned every Saturday. William Parker brought an old photograph of himself beside a German shepherd named Duke. Margaret prepared special meals for dogs recovering from dental work. Cole Davis came 3 days a week and spoke very little. Cole had served as a Marine infantryman. He slept in his truck some nights because enclosed rooms made him uneasy. He startled when strangers approached from behind and became embarrassed afterward. On his first visit, Shadow dropped the red ball at Cole's boots. Cole stared down. "I do not play fetch," he said. Shadow waited. Cole threw the ball 6 feet. Shadow retrieved it and returned. The next throw went 15 feet. By the end of the afternoon, Cole was laughing so hard he had to sit in the grass. Nathan watched from the barn, but said nothing. The ranch did not offer therapy. No one used clinical language. People brushed dogs, repaired fences, filled bowls, or sat beneath trees. The work made conversation optional. That was why conversation eventually came. One evening, Cole and Nathan repaired a gate as the sun lowered behind the ridge. "You ever miss it?" Cole asked. "Every day. You ever wish you could go back?" "Some days." Cole drove a screw into the hinge. "I thought missing it meant I was broken." Nathan looked across the pasture. Atlas stood with his face lifted into the wind. "Missing a place that hurt you does not mean you want the pain," Nathan said. Sometimes you miss knowing exactly who needed you. Cole swallowed. What do you do when no one does? Nathan handed him another screw. You find a life that asks something honest. Winter rain came early that year. The first storm was gentle. Water darkened the soil and filled the creek. The dogs remained inside the barn during the heaviest downpour, listening to rain strike the roof. Dakota paced. Nathan sat beside her until she settled. The second storm arrived with hard wind from the west. Branches fell across the access road. Power flickered twice. The generator started automatically, restoring lights and the medication refrigerator. Luis, the county inspector, called to remind Nathan that the hills above the property had burned 2 summers earlier. Heavy rain could send debris into the lower pasture. Nathan moved the dogs to the higher barn and checked the drainage channel. Atlas followed him into the wind. Stay inside, Nathan said. Atlas remained at his side. By midnight, rain struck the ranch almost sideways. Volunteers had gone home before the road became unsafe. Only Nathan and Cole remained overnight. 23 dogs rested in separated areas of the barn. Some slept. Others watched the doors. At 1:12 in the morning, the generator stopped. The lights died. The barn filled with darkness and the sound of rain. Nathan grabbed a flashlight. Cole, check the transfer switch. A sharp smell touched the air. Hot. Plastic. Atlas was already moving. He ran, faster than Nathan had seen him move since leaving the center, toward the north feed room. He stopped at the door and barked. Nathan opened it. Smoke rolled along the ceiling. An electrical junction box had sparked behind stacked feed bins. The old dry wall panel beside it had begun to smolder. Fire! Nathan shouted. Cole pulled the alarm handle, but without power the exterior bell gave only one weak ring. Nathan grabbed an extinguisher. The first burst knocked down the visible flame. Then smoke pushed from inside the wall. It is in the cavity, Cole said. They had minutes, perhaps less. Nathan opened the south fire exit. Cole began clipping leashes onto dogs in the first recovery zone. The evacuation plan existed on paper, practiced twice in calm daylight. Now wind tore at the doors, rain blinded them, and frightened animals read every change in human breathing. Nathan forced his voice low. Easy. With me. Atlas moved through the barn, nudging Echo awake, guiding Cooper away from a fallen bull, placing himself where nervous dogs could see him. The first 8 dogs reached the covered exercise court outside. The second group followed. Smoke thickened. A beam cracked above the feed room. The sound dropped Nathan into another year. For one terrible second, the barn disappeared. He was inside a damaged building overseas, dust closing his throat, radio voices breaking apart, Ranger barking somewhere beyond a wall. Nathan could not move. Atlas struck him in the chest with both front paws. Nathan stumbled backward. The old dog barked directly into his face. The barn returned. Smoke. Rain. Cole shouting. Dogs waiting. Nathan grabbed Atlas's collar. I am here. Atlas turned and ran toward the west stalls. Nathan followed. They evacuated the third group. Cole counted at the covered court. 22. Nathan counted again. Shadow was missing. The red ball lay near the barn door. Where did he go? Cole shouted. A section of ceiling collapsed inside the feed room, sending sparks into the aisle. Nathan scanned the stalls. Atlas lowered his head and moved against the smoke. He reached the rear storage door and scratched hard. Nathan opened it. The room was empty, but a small maintenance hatch in the floor stood ajar. Rainwater had backed through the drainage line, pushing the cover upward. Shadow, frightened by the smoke, had squeezed into the narrow service trench beneath the barn. Nathan heard claws scrape below. I will go, Cole said. You are smaller. You have the breathing mask. Nathan put the emergency mask over his face and lowered himself through the hatch. The trench was less than 3 feet high. Cold water rushed around his knees. Smoke drifted through gaps in the floorboards above. Shadow. A faint whine answered from the darkness. Nathan crawled toward it. Behind him, Atlas pushed his head through the hatch, trying to follow. Stay, Nathan commanded. Atlas stopped. It was the first formal command Nathan had given him. The shepherd held position, trembling with effort. Nathan found Shadow pinned behind a fallen section of ductwork. The dog was uninjured but trapped, his body pressed against the trench wall. Nathan lifted the duct. Pain tore through his old shoulder. The metal shifted only an inch. Above him, wood cracked. For a moment, panic closed his throat. Then he heard Atlas bark once from the hatch. Not frantic, not pleading. A signal. Nathan changed his angle, braced both boots against the trench wall, and forced the duct upward. Come on, Shadow. The dog crawled free. Nathan clipped a short lead to his collar and pushed him toward the hatch. Cole pulled Shadow into the storage room. Your turn, Cole shouted. Nathan crawled back as water rose around his thighs. The instant his hand reached the opening, Atlas gripped the sleeve of his jacket and pulled while Cole grabbed his arm. They fell onto the storage room floor together. A second later, part of the aisle ceiling crashed across the hatch. Nathan rolled onto his back, coughing through the mask. Atlas stood over him. You broke your stay, Nathan whispered. Atlas licked rainwater from his cheek. Firefighters reached the ranch 20 minutes later after cutting through a fallen tree on the access road. They contained the fire before it reached the main barn roof, but the north wall and feed room were badly damaged. The dogs spent the rest of the night in evacuation trailers and the farmhouse garage. At dawn, rain weakened to a steady drizzle. Nathan walked from dog to dog with Sarah, who had arrived as soon as the road opened. No animal had suffered more than mild smoke exposure. Shadow had a small scrape on one paw. Atlas had strained his front leg, but refused to lie down until every dog was checked. Nathan finally sat with him beneath the farmhouse awning. His hands would not stop shaking. Emily arrived, saw the blackened barn wall, and covered her mouth. Nathan looked at the damage. I failed them. Emily turned sharply. You evacuated 23 elderly dogs from a burning barn in a storm. The wiring should have been replaced. It passed inspection. I should have known. Atlas pushed his nose under Nathan's hand. Emily crouched in front of him. Listen to me. Responsibility is not the same as control. You can do everything right and still face danger. What matters is what you do next. Nathan looked at Atlas. The old dog's coat was damp and streaked with soot. His eyes remained steady. What I do next, Nathan said, is rebuild. The county suspended the sanctuary permit until the barn could be certified again. The dogs could remain temporarily because the farmhouse garage and trailers met emergency standards, but only for 14 days. Nathan called contractors. The earliest estimate was 6 weeks. For the first time since walking into the retirement center, he had no answer. Then trucks began appearing at the gate. Harold brought 10 former Marines. William arrived with a union electrician. The carpenter who had repaired the roof came with an entire crew. A building supplier donated fire-resistant panels. A feed store replaced everything lost in the smoke. 2 local restaurants sent meals for volunteers. Cole stood beside Nathan as the first damaged wall came down. You told me to find a life that asks something honest, he said. This one is asking. More than 60 people worked in shifts. Nathan tried to lead every task until Margaret took the clipboard from his hands. You cannot direct construction, manage medications, answer the county, and refuse to sleep, she said. I can. No. You can collapse dramatically and create more work for all of us. Nathan almost argued. Atlas, lying nearby with his sore leg wrapped, raised his head. Nathan surrendered the clipboard. For the first time in years, he allowed other people to carry part of the mission. The rebuilt barn had fire-resistant interior walls, a sprinkler system, battery alarms independent of the generator, wider exits, and a second medication refrigerator in the farmhouse. The service trench was sealed. The drainage system was rerouted away from the structure. Luis inspected it on the 13th day. He spent 3 hours testing doors, alarms, water pressure, and evacuation access. At last, he signed the reinstatement. Most facilities recover to the old standard, he said. You exceeded it. Nathan looked at the volunteers gathered outside. We exceeded it. That evening, everyone shared food beneath the oak tree. No speeches had been planned. Nathan disliked speeches. But Harold tapped a spoon against a coffee mug. When I first came here, he said, I thought we were helping a man care for some dogs. He looked around the circle. Turns out the dogs were building a unit. Laughter moved through the group. Cole sat in the grass with Shadow's red ball in his hand. Emily leaned against the new barn door. Sarah checked Atlas's bandage for the 3rd time. Nathan stood. He did not know what to say. Atlas solved the problem by walking to him and sitting on his boot. Nathan rested a hand on the old shepherd's head. The gate stays open, he said. That was enough. In the weeks after the fire, the ranch became more organized without losing its peace. Emily helped create a nonprofit foundation. Sarah recruited veterinary volunteers. Margaret built medication schedules no one could misunderstand. Harold managed maintenance teams. Cole moved into the small caretaker cottage near the south pasture and accepted a paid position he initially insisted he did not deserve. "You show up," Nathan told him. "That is the first qualification." One visitor changed the ranch in a way Nathan had not expected. Captain Elena Ruiz arrived on a gray February morning and remained inside her car for nearly 20 minutes. She had served as Mercy's final handler during medical evacuation training, but an injury had ended her career before the dog retired. For 2 years, Elena had told herself that visiting would confuse Mercy. The truth was harder. She feared the dog would not remember her, and she feared even more that Mercy would. Nathan walked to the car, but did not open the door. "You can leave," he said through the lowered window. "No one here will judge you." Elena stared toward the barn. "I have already left her once." "You were injured." "She did not know why I disappeared." Nathan looked toward the pasture, where Mercy rested near Margaret's chair. "Dogs do not need us to rewrite the past," he said. "They need us to be honest in the moment we have." Elena finally stepped out. Mercy noticed her before they reached the gate. The old shepherd rose so quickly that Margaret caught the chair beside her. Mercy took 3 uncertain steps, stopped, and lifted her nose. Elena stood with both hands pressed against her mouth. "Mercy," she whispered. The dog's ears moved forward. Elena gave a hand signal she had not used in years. Mercy crossed the pasture. She did not leap or bark. Age and arthritis had taken that kind of speed. She simply walked straight to Elena, pressed her head against the woman's chest, and remained there. Elena sank to her knees. "I am sorry," she said into the dog's coat. "I am so sorry." Mercy leaned harder. Nathan turned away to give them privacy. Atlas remained near the gate, watching without intruding. Elena returned every week after that. She helped with mobility exercises and taught volunteers the quiet signals Mercy still remembered. In time, she began working with other former handlers who were afraid to face the animals they had lost through reassignment, injury, or circumstance. The reunions did not always look joyful. Some dogs hesitated. Some handlers cried before entering. A few meetings revealed that memory had faded. Yet every visit made room for truth, and truth proved gentler than years of imagined rejection. Nathan added one line to the ranch guidelines. "No apology is too late if it arrives." With patience, he placed it near the entrance, not for the dogs, but for the people who still believed love had an expiration date. The ranch received a name after months of avoiding one. A child visiting with her class stood beneath the cedar board at the entrance and asked why it was blank. Nathan handed her a pencil. "What would you call this place?" She looked at the old dogs resting in sunlight. "Home," she said. The final sign read, "Every hero deserves a home." Beneath it, in smaller letters, were the words Atlas Ranch. Nathan objected to the second line. Emily ignored him. Visitors came by appointment. Veterans walked the pasture trails. Children read aloud beside dogs who did not care if they missed a word. Former handlers brought photographs and stories. No one was required to speak. The dogs chose their people with quiet accuracy. Mercy often rested beside widows who had spent years caring for others. Boone preferred children who moved gently. Cooper followed the voice of a blind Navy veteran named Daniel, who joked that at least one of them knew where he was going. Shadow kept selecting Cole, though by then everyone understood the choice had been mutual. Atlas remained closest to Nathan. He also began doing something new. Several times, Nathan found him standing at the closed door of an old storage room in the original barn wing. The room held tools, family boxes, and a military footlocker Nathan had not opened since moving to the ranch. One afternoon, Atlas scratched the door. Nathan let him inside. The shepherd walked directly to the footlocker and Saturday, "You have enough history of your own," Nathan said. "You do not need mine." Atlas did not move. Nathan opened the lid. Inside were uniforms, maps, medals he had never displayed, Ranger's leather collar, and a stack of letters tied with faded cord. Beneath them lay a notebook. Nathan recognized the cover. He had written in it during the first months after Ranger died. Most pages contained fragments, feeding schedules, ideas for quiet kennels, sketches of pasture fencing, a list of names of retired handlers who might volunteer. On the final written page was a sentence he did not remember writing. "Built. The place we both needed when the mission ended." Nathan sat on the floor. Atlas lowered himself beside him. For years, Nathan had believed the ranch began when he heard about 23 dogs at risk. The notebook proved the idea had begun much earlier, in grief, then waited until he could survive hope. He carried Ranger's collar to the farmhouse porch and hung it beside the framed photograph. That evening, he told the story to Cole. "I thought I rescued this promise from the footlocker," Nathan said. Cole shook his head. "Maybe Atlas did." Spring came with green grass along the fence lines and wildflowers beneath the oaks. The dogs changed in ways medical charts could only partly capture. Their bodies still aged. Arthritis did not disappear. Eyes did not clear. Old injuries remained. But fear softened. Ranger 2 began sleeping through the night. Dakota sought company during storms instead of pacing alone. Echo learned the ranch through sight and scent. Following hand signals, Sarah developed. Cooper walked the same path to the pond every morning, touching 3 fence posts along the way like landmarks. Emily brought 23 polished brass nameplates from the retirement center. "We replaced the old kennel doors," she explained. A volunteer kept the plates. Nathan had built a long cedar wall inside the new barn. Together they mounted the names in a single line. Atlas, Ranger 2, Dakota, Echo, Shadow, Mercy, Cooper, Boone, and 15 more. No service numbers. No ranks. No lists of missions. Only names. "Should we add their records?" Emily asked. Nathan looked through the open doors at the dogs in the pasture. "Records explain what they did," he said. "Their lives here show who they are." A bench was placed before the wall. Veterans sat there when they needed quiet. Children traced the engraved letters with careful fingers. Former handlers sometimes stood before one name for a long time, then walked outside and found the dog waiting in sunlight. The ranch welcomed 2 more retired dogs that summer after space opened in the center. Nathan did not announce it publicly. He simply drove the trailer, completed the introductions, and added 2 names to the cedar wall. The original 23 were no longer a rescue story. They were a family capable of making room. Atlas grew older. His muzzle turned almost white. He rested more often on the walk around the property. Some mornings, Nathan shortened the route without mentioning why. Sarah adjusted his medication. A veterinarian diagnosed progressive heart disease. Treatment could make him comfortable, but it could not reverse time. Nathan received the news in the medical room. "How long?" he asked. "No one can promise," Sarah said. "Months, perhaps. Maybe longer." Nathan looked through the window. Atlas lay beneath the oak, watching the gate. "I have asked him for too much already." Sarah shook her head. "You did not ask. He chose." Nathan spent the following weeks pretending ordinary routines were ordinary. He rose before dawn. Atlas waited on the porch. They crossed the pasture, slower now. Nathan filled bowls while Atlas watched. They sat beneath the oak in the evening. Sometimes Nathan spoke about Ranger. Sometimes about men whose names he did not say. Sometimes he described repairs Atlas had witnessed and visitors the dog had helped without knowing. Atlas listened with his head on Nathan's boot. One September afternoon, a boy named Lucas visited with his mother. Lucas had stopped speaking after his father died during a training accident. He communicated through nods and drawings. The boy sat beneath the oak with a sketchbook. Atlas approached him. Nathan watched carefully. Atlas no longer walked to every visitor. He saved his strength. He stopped beside Lucas and lowered himself. The boy drew the shepherd's ears, his silver muzzle, and the old identification tag Nathan still kept on his collar beside the newer leather one. After nearly an hour, Lucas placed the drawing in front of Atlas. "You look tired," he whispered. His mother covered her mouth. Atlas rested his muzzle on the boy's knee. Lucas looked toward Nathan. "Does he know?" Nathan sat beside them. "Know what?" "That he is safe." Nathan looked at the old dog. "Yes," he said. "I think he does." Lucas nodded. "Good." The picture remained on the farmhouse wall. Autumn returned. On a cool morning in late October, 1 year after Nathan first entered the retirement center, Atlas did not rise from his bed. Nathan knelt beside him. The dog's breathing was shallow but calm. His eyes opened when Nathan touched his shoulder. Sarah came at once. She listened to his heart, checked his gums, and met Nathan's gaze. "There is no emergency we can fix," she said softly. "His heart is tired." Nathan understood. He carried Atlas outside on a thick blanket and placed him beneath the great oak tree. The other dogs wandered nearby. No one crowded him. Shadow lay 10 feet away with the red ball between his paws. Cooper rested along the path. Dakota settled on the opposite side of the tree. Word traveled quietly. Emily arrived first. Then James, Harold, and Margaret came. William stood with his cap in both hands. Cole sat in the grass and looked away when tears came. No one gave a speech. Nathan remained beside Atlas through the afternoon. He thanked him for the first warning bark in the kennel. He thanked him for refusing to leave the others behind. He thanked him for the night of the fire, for breaking through smoke and memory, for finding Shadow, for pulling Nathan toward the hatch. He thanked him for the porch, the pasture, and every breath they had counted together when old sounds returned. "You were never mine," Nathan said. "You chose to walk beside me. That was more than I deserved." Atlas's ears shifted faintly toward his voice. The sun lowered beyond the western pasture. Warm light moved through the grass. Atlas lifted his head once. He looked toward the barn, the open gate, and the dogs resting without fences around them. Then he looked at Nathan. His tail touched the blanket one time. Nathan placed both hands around the old shepherd's face. "Mission complete, my friend." Atlas released a slow breath and did not take another. The ranch remained silent except for wind in the oak leaves. Nathan rested his forehead against Atlas's. "You are home," he whispered. They buried Atlas beneath the tree the following morning. Children placed wildflowers around a simple stone. William hung Ranger's old leather collar beneath Atlas's name on the cedar wall. Emily moved Atlas's brass plate to the center. Nathan added no medals, no list of missions, and no grand inscription. The stone beneath the oak carried only 3 lines. "Atlas, he led us home. We remembered." For several weeks, Nathan still looked toward the porch at dawn, expecting to see a silver muzzle in the half-light. Grief changed the shape of routine. It did not erase it. 24 dogs still needed breakfast. Medications still waited. Veterans still arrived at the gate carrying burdens they could not name. Children still came with books. Cole still threw the red ball for Shadow every afternoon. Nathan kept moving. One morning, he found Lucas's drawing on the porch. The boy had returned with his mother and placed it beside Nathan's coffee. Under the picture, Lucas had written a new sentence. "Safe is when someone remembers to come back." Nathan read it twice. Then he carried it to the cedar wall and placed it beneath Atlas's name. The ranch continued. A year later, the retirement center called about 4 dogs no other facility could accept. Nathan listened to the medical histories, looked across the expanded south pasture, and asked the same question he had asked before. "When can we meet them?" The answer was Thursday. On Thursday morning, an old diesel pickup turned through the center gate. Inside the kennel wing, 4 gray muzzles lifted toward the sound. Nathan entered with Cole, Sarah, and a young volunteer named Lucas, who now spoke easily whenever a dog was near. Emily met them at the office. More silver showed in her hair, but her smile was the same. "How many are you prepared to take?" she asked. Nathan looked down the aisle. He remembered the day Atlas had struck his gate, the clipboard falling, the impossible promise, the storm, the fire, the open pasture, and one tired tail moving in farewell. "All the ones who need us," he said. This time, Emily did not drop the clipboard. She opened the first kennel. Back at the ranch, the cedar sign above the gate had weathered to a darker gold. "Every hero deserves a home" was still visible from the road. Beneath it, Atlas Ranch welcomed anyone who entered with patience and respect. The new dogs arrived near sunset. As the trailer opened, the residents gathered at a distance. Shadow, older now, held the same red ball. Cooper listened from the path. Dakota lifted her face into the evening wind. The first newcomer hesitated at the ramp. Nathan waited. He did not pull the leash. He did not call. At last, the dog stepped down and placed one paw on the earth. A breeze moved through the oak leaves. For an instant, Nathan heard a single metal tag tap gently against a collar somewhere behind him. He turned. No dog stood there. Only the path leading toward the great oak tree, bright beneath the last light of day. Nathan smiled and faced the newcomer again. "It is all right," he said. "Home is in front of you." The dog walked forward, and the gate remained open. If this story stayed with you, share in the comments what loyalty, courage, or a second chance means in your own life. Subscribe for more stories about the quiet heroes who protect us, heal us, and remind us that no faithful heart should ever be forgotten.